All right, it's a new week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Lots of things to talk about this week, lots of things happening this week. Pitt will be back in the South Side for spring camp practice number 4, I think, tomorrow. And we'll be down there. We'll have lots of coverage for you at Panther-Lair.com and here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, Pitt basketball not in the NCAA tournament. The brackets announced last night, and Pitt is not part of it as we expected. I don't think there's any surprise there. We were pretty much doing postmortems on Pitt basketball last week. And so that is pretty much the story with that. But there's a handful of Pitt basketball things I wanted to talk about here to start off the week. Maybe it's not the best way to start off the week, but I want to do it to start off this week. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit of Pitt hoops here. I got a few topics I want to get off my get off. I don't want to say get off my chest. It's not like, I'm carrying around a lot of angst about this. I mean, we all watched this team play 32 games. We all know what the deal is, what the situation is, and who they are, and what happened this season. But there's a handful of things that I feel like we could talk about today. Obviously, starting with their decision to decline preemptively any postseason opportunity that came their way. We can start with that because they announced that on Friday. And then we can work through a few other topics that I just wanted to kind of wrap up. And we'll talk Pitt hoops throughout this spring as they lose transfers and add transfers. But there's a couple things here, sort of odds and ends, to wrap up the postseason, or wrap up the season, I should say, before we get into March Madness that I wanted to talk about. So we'll talk more Pitt football tomorrow as Pitt football, spring camp continues and starts up again tomorrow after having yesterday and today off. But for today, it's Pitt basketball. The decision to skip the NIT, what the turning point in the season was. Some of the top priorities for returning, what we think Jeff Capel's future looks like, and what next season has to be for the basketball Panthers. So a lot of hoops talk. Let's jump into it here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Getting the week started. Monday, today is actually a big day. Not only is it, the day after Selection Sunday and all of those things, but this is the final day to take advantage of our introductory offer on our new site at, Panther-Lair.com on the 24/7 Sports Network. It's still Panther-Lair.com, but you have to go to 247sports.com/college/Pittsburgh if you want to access the site now. But you go to Panther-Lair.com. We got a lot of great coverage there. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, all kinds of stuff that you want to take part in, all kinds of stuff that you want to read. And then, of course, our, the message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. It's taken off. In the 2 weeks that we've been on the 24/7 Sports Network, the site has taken off. And I think a big part of it, we're drawing people over with a great introductory promo offer. You might have subscriptions elsewhere. We understand you don't want to have multiple subscriptions at one time. But I tell you what we're doing is we will give you a subscription to Panther-Lair.com right now for 75% off. You sign up right now, you get 75% off your first year. But the thing is, this only lasts today. Today is the final day of this promo. It ends tonight, and you need to take advantage of it so you can get the best Pitt coverage. You don't miss anything at Panther-Lair.com. So go check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, and then you'll see it. The link is all over the place there. Get 75% off your first year at Panther-Lair.com. It's a great promo. It's going to end tonight. So if you've been waiting, you've been on the fence, just go do it. It's like $24 or $26 a year or something like that. It's like $2 a month for your first year. I mean, like, how could you not? You know what I mean? How could you not take advantage of this deal? Go over to Panther-Lair.com and get the special promo right now. So a little bit of a news dump on Friday came out. Pitt sent out a press release. I forget what time they sent it. Sometime in the afternoon, sometime around 4 o'clock or so, that they will be declining any postseason opportunities. Press release actually quoting Alan Green, the Pitt athletic director, said, quote, "Coach Capel and I are fully committed to positioning Pitt basketball for sustained success in the ACC and NCAA tournament. Our responsibility is to relentlessly evaluate and enhance every aspect of our program, ensuring it reflects the championship spirit of our city. Because that work is already underway, we've determined that the best path forward for our program is to forego postseason tournaments this year as we build for the future." No, I think there were like sort of initial jokes and reactions like, yeah, they're turning down an invite that they're not even going to get. I mean, they would have gotten an invite to the NIT. Failing that, there are other postseason tournaments they could have been a part of. I think the NIT would have invited them. They got invited last year, declined the invitation. This year, they're not even waiting until after that point. They're just saying ahead of time, like, don't even bother. Like, we're not playing in a postseason tournament. And I think there's, I have mixed feelings about that. And I suspect you do too. I mean, I don't think there's been a lot of outrage among Pitt fans. Like, why would they turn that down? We want to see them. They need to get better and all this stuff. I think everyone understands the sort of landscape of college sports as it exists right now. That the idea of, you've got a young roster and you're going to play them in the NIT and play a couple more games and it's going to help them get ready. Like, that just doesn't exist anymore. You don't know who's coming back. You don't know who's leaving. You don't know what your roster is going to look like a year from now or 6 months from now, because you don't know what kind of impact the transfer portal is going to have, good and bad, additions and departures, right? And so that takes away some of the value of the NIT. And then you have guys or playing in any postseason tournament that's not the big dance, right? And you have guys who are intending to leave. Well, they're probably not going to participate in that. It's just like sitting out the bowl game. You have guys who might be hurt or something like that, which I think was brought up last year. That part of it was they had players who were injured in addition to guys who would be leaving. And so, how big's your roster? Is it going to be really representative of who your team is? Like, if you lose, if all your seniors are like, no, I'm not playing in the NIT. And I don't know what Zach Austin and Ishmael Leggett and Damian Dunn would say, but, if your seniors are like, no, I'm not playing in the NIT, and, your guys who intend to leave aren't playing in the NIT, I mean, you could be down to just, a half dozen scholarship players, conceivably. And I'm not just saying specifically to Pitt. Like, I'm not just running this hypothetical on Pitt. I'm saying any team could conceivably be down to a half dozen scholarship players. And so does it do you a lot of good to go out and play with 6 scholarship guys and a bunch of walk-ons? And no disrespect to anybody there. I'm sure they would play it with a lot of pride, but if you end up being like a one and done and looking pretty bad in the process because you're missing half your team, well, did you really gain anything out of that? No, you lost. You lost the game. You've lost money. It's ultimately a money loser to play in these tournaments. And the reality is it just doesn't matter like it used to. It doesn't carry the same cachet. Not like anybody really was all that thrilled about an NIT championship or wins in the NIT or participation in the NIT in the past. I mean, it was always viewed as second rate. It was always viewed as being below the NCAA tournament. But there was still, it could be compelling, and it's funny. I said this to someone yesterday. As much as we all made fun of the CBI, as much as we all clowned on it and I enjoyed it in its own sort of weird, perverse kind of way, darkly comic kind of way, the reality is, the NIT game a couple years later when they played George Washington or whoever it was infinitely more depressing, infinitely less interesting, and just altogether more of a bummer than the CBI ever was. It was an embarrassment far more than the CBI ever was, because they didn't even look like they wanted to be there. That CBI team at least played hard. The NIT team didn't even play hard. So it's lost a lot of its luster, I think. And then you throw in the landscape of college sports, and it's just not worth it for the most part. And teams will play, they'll find teams, but I mean, like, you got to wonder what the lifespan is on the NIT going forward. I don't know if it's all that great, because I think more and more teams will make decisions like Pitt has made of, like, you know what, the season ended, that sucked. We didn't have the season we hoped to have, blew out, busted out early in the conference tournament. We're just going to be done with it, move on. And I think there is like a real and immediate, like, before and after moment. Like, when the season ends, boom, that's it. You're immediately on to the next one. I think the Pitt coaches are already working on, who could potentially go into the transfer portal, who's going to go into the portal from their team that they need to replace, and, who could they be looking at to fill those spots when they go into the portal themselves. Go hunting in the portal themselves once it opens. And And I mean, I think it quickly turns over. I don't think you spend much time reflecting on the past when the season ends. I mean, you should reflect on the past to try and figure out why it ended the way it did or why it went the way it did. But I think they move on pretty quick. And so, with how fast things sort of move, like playing in the NIT could be a distraction. I mean, it could distract you from the bigger goal, which is improving your roster to have a better season next year. Like playing in the NIT, it could interfere with your goal of making sure you don't play in the NIT. Like what are you focused on, or what's your motivation in the off season? It's to avoid the situation you're in right now. It's avoid being in the position you're in right now. And for almost every team in the country, that's what they are. That's where they are. They arrive some point in March or April of saying, well, we don't want to get back here again, except for just a handful of teams who really do make it all the way to the Final Four. You say, well, we don't want to get back here again. We want to do better. How are we going to do better? Let's go right to work on addressing needs through the portal. And if you play in the NIT, I mean, that's taking time away, practice time, game time, focus, energy. It's taking away from your brain power, bandwidth in the parlance of our times to address those other more pressing matters. Winning the NIT now or participating in the NIT now is not nearly as important as getting ready, preparing to try to make yourself better next season. And so I understand the decision. I haven't seen too much outcry of why Pitt wouldn't play or didn't play. I would like to see, I mean, I can sit here and say I would like to see some of these players play again. I think I'm like you, that I'm by and large done with this whole team, though. This team as a whole, I'm not sure I need to see much more out of them. I don't know if I need to see them play any more games, and so I'm not entirely disappointed that they made the decision that they made to not play in the in any postseason tournament. I'm curious if I am curious if they got. Actually, there's two things I'm curious about. One, I'm curious if they got input from the players. If they took a poll, took a vote, put it up to the players at all, or just the adults made the decision. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere in between, a little bit of both. And the second thing that's interesting is the press release only quoted Alan Green. And I don't know if many people pointed this out or not, or if maybe it's just the kind of thing that sticks out to me. Only Alan Green, no Jeff Capel. Last year when they declined the NIT, it was a press release that quoted Jeff Capel. Heather Lyke was not quoted in the press release. It was just Jeff Capel for like 2 paragraphs. I mean, he said a lot in that press release. Whereas this year, it was only Alan Green for that 1 paragraph that I read to you, with no quote from Jeff Capel. Now, I don't think that's something I'm going to read too much into. I think it's interesting on a number of fronts. I don't think it, no, don't read into it to mean that Alan Green's going to fire Jeff Capel. Jeff Capel, I mean, like skipping ahead to a different topic, Jeff Capel's not going anywhere. Unless Jeff Capel chooses to go somewhere, Jeff Capel's not going anywhere. I think most of us have all kind of come to terms with that and accepted that and understand it. And so I don't take, Alan Green being the lone voice in the press release to mean that that's his intention, to fire Jeff Capel or something like that. I'm not 100% clear. I think maybe Capel just said, go ahead, you can say it. I don't have anything to add. I do think it presents something of a unified front for the university, for the athletic department, I should say, with Alan Green sort of speaking for the athletic department and speaking on the goals of the basketball program. And I think that's interesting. But I don't know. There's probably not too much to read into there, but it's curious. A couple other things. Priorities. Guys that you want to keep. Now, we talked about this on the Wednesday Night Live show. I wrote about it in the 321 column on Friday. If you wrote that, or if you read that, and I mean, like, this is really the big topic right now. I mean, there's 2 big topics after you move past the end of the season. I mean, I was going to sit here and talk about where I thought the turning point in the season was. We don't need to spend much time on that. It was a Virginia game. Like, it was the Virginia game. Jeff Capel pointed to the Florida State and Clemson games, the Louisville and Clemson games, those close losses at home, Louisville and Clemson, plus that Florida State game. He didn't actually mention the Florida State game. I think he mentioned the Louisville and Clemson games at home as potential turning points in the season. He skipped over the Florida State game where he tried to fight the whole Florida State roster as a potential turning point. I actually don't think that was a turning point either. I just think sometimes you forget that some of these things happen during the season. That happened. I don't think the Duke game was the turning point, even though that is that separation point between the 12-2 start and the 5-13 finish. I don't think it was the Duke game. I don't think it was the Florida State or Clemson games. I don't even think it was the loss at Wake Forest, a 2-point loss. It was the loss at home to Virginia, because whatever was still lurking out there, whatever possibility still existed, whatever hope there was, got crushed when Pitt was down 20 to Virginia at home. A must-win game, a should-win game. Definitely they'll win this one and they'll make it interesting by winning this game and keeping themselves in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. And they blew that game. And they never recovered. I don't think their NCAA tournament hopes ever recovered. They had a close loss to Carolina in the next game, a 1-point loss. They got blown out at SMU. They beat Miami and Syracuse. So you said, wow, look, they're winning games again. And then they blew it at Notre Dame, blew it against Georgia Tech, blew it against Louisville, and blew it at NC State. And it all comes back to that Virginia game. So, that to me is the turning point. I wrote about that in the 3-2-1 column. But I think as far as recapping the past of what happened this season, I mean, that was the game where it all fell apart, fully fell apart, beyond any chance of repair, I think. But then as you look, so that's the past. But as you look forward, there's two big questions right now. Who do they keep and who do they add? And what are the priorities of players to keep on the roster and what are the priorities of positions to add on the roster? Now, these are my own opinions about who they should keep or who they should want to keep. I haven't consulted the coaching staff about this. They're free to call me and tell me who they want to keep on the roster. But to me, I think there's a handful of guys. And there was the question that was brought up on the Wednesday Night Live show of which guys do you 100% want back on the roster. And I think it's just 100%. I think is a interesting way to phrase it. It's an important way to phrase it because it allows you to take out some of the, well, maybe this guy. 100%, I want Jalen Lowe back on the roster. Jalen Lowe did not develop and progress the way we thought he could or he needed to this season, but he's still a really talented young player who I think will be even better as a junior than he was as a sophomore in a lot of ways. I think his shooting will improve, probably due to decision-making. I think his assist to turnover numbers will improve, again, due to decision-making. I think he'll become better at facilitating his teammates, which will then open up more playmaking opportunities for him. I think he can take some big steps forward next year. And so he's a guy I 100% want back. Ditto for Brandon Cummings. I think Brandon Cummings is going to be a really good player. I think he showed enough flashes as a true freshman that you want him back. Obviously, Amsal Delilich. Of course, I want Amsal Delilich back. There's no question about that. He's that's my guy, right? I mean, how could I want him to leave? I would like to have him back. And the Twins. I would say I 100% want the Twins back on this roster. Not at the expense of bringing other players in, but give me those guys as seniors. Give me one more year of watching those guys out there with all that length and weird kinetic energy that they bring to the court, the shooting, the occasional big block. Give me a year of Jorge as a senior, getting serious minutes where he can take a respectable amount of shots. And I think he's going to score a lot. I think he can make a lot of threes. Give me Guillermo, find a role for him that fits him. I would say as the center, figure that out. You probably need another transfer to kind of go with him, but give me Guillermo. Get one more year of those guys. I 100% want them on the roster. And I would say the same probably for Papa Amadou Kanti. I would say 100% want him on the roster. The rest are not zeros. It's not 0% on anybody else, Cam Corrin or Marlon Barnes or Amdi Najai or any of those guys. It's not 100% like it is with those 5 or 6 that I mentioned off the bat. Those are the guys I think Pitt absolutely should get back. I absolutely need back, and will help create a strong foundation for this team. And they're going to have to add to it with the portal and bring in guys to fill in around those players. But those are the guys for me that I want back. And I don't know, I got some differing, I wrote about that in the 3-2-1 column on Friday. It got some pushback, which I expect. And I mean, I think that's part of the fun of having, writing an opinion column is that you get pushback and differing opinions and disagreement and all that. And that's fun. I enjoy that part of it. I like seeing what other people think. So leave it in the comments here if you disagree with any of the 5 or 6 that I chose as 100% back guys, or if you have other thoughts on guys that you would 100% want back. And there's probably some people out there who would say, I don't want any of them back. I don't want anybody back from a team that had a season like this team did, which is understandable. I get that. All right, I think that's about it here. I think I talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about. We'll have football talk throughout the week. We'll have basketball talk as basketball news happens in the transfer portal era. It's March Madness week, though, so you got great basketball to watch all week. Well, starting later in the week, but looking forward to that for sure. And, of course, we'll be talking about everything right here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe. Don't forget, we've got our promo at Panther-Lair.com. It's ending tonight. 75% off your first year. You're not going to find a better deal than that. So go take advantage of it now at Panther-Lair.com. All right, thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday. It's officially St. Patrick's Day, right? Enjoy your St. Patrick's Day. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.